Hello there, Internet. So, Power Metal Incorporated is a new band that just released their first single, and it's accompanied by their first music video, which was edited by myself. And so, we're gonna spend some time diving into the video edit today, and I'll show you what I did to make the video as awesome as it was. This is the first time I've done a lot of the stuff I did for this music video. I've never done color correction or like VFX to this level before. So hopefully if you're doing video edit VFX stuff, you'll get some insight from this. So step one is to download the footage from the Google Drive. This was shot in 3 different continents, and so it was all put into one drive, and I was able to download it and then start working on organizing it. The downloads came in a couple different folders that just had a bunch of random character names. So I went through each one of those clips and sorted them, and this number right here was a much longer number. It was just like the number that comes out of the camera, but the last 3 digits were unique for all of them. So I kept the last 3 digits, and then I added the words right here. I watched through every single clip, added the words, and then put them in the folders, and then they have a shot list right here. So I was able to download this. So this is how they kind of structured their script, had all their ideas and ordered things, and that was able to inform me on what scenes to put in what order. So this is all for the narrative. All this stuff is just the people in the office. A couple B-roll. These things didn't really fit into the main edit. Effects, that's just a couple things I downloaded off the internet for extra effects during the video. And then these folders are all the musicians, all their footage. So once you get all the footage put in the folders and organized and you know what you're doing, then you can drag all of these into Final Cut, into the project right here, and then all the folder names will become their own keywords, and makes it a lot easier to navigate within Final Cut. So they did multiple takes for each shot, and so you want to go and find the best one because you're not going to use all of them. And so they have all of these shots, and I found the one that I liked the best, which was this one up here, and I deleted all these other ones. So anything that you see that's got the red mark is something that I determined was the subpar one. And so I kept the one that had the most emotion or the most amount of comic relief. It just hit the best. So these are all of the clips, and so I'm going to go ahead and do hide rejected, and now we're just going to look at the ones that I've kept. And so these are the ones that I can focus on for the main edit. So for color grading, I took this Udemy course by Miles Fearnley. It's 6 hours of just awesome information. I've never done it properly before. All this footage was shot in log. So this is what the footage looks like coming out of the camera. And then I turned that into this. It's quite a difference. Learning how to turn this into something that's actually something that you would see on TV or watch in a movie. I wanted to make sure that I did it right, and so I took the course from Miles, and he goes over all the steps on how to do it properly. And I took a whole bunch of notes. In this file right here, goes over all this stuff, and so all the color science between exposure and saturation, and then just other cool tips and tricks to make it more cinematic looking. Awesome course, highly recommend taking it. On sale, I think I got it for like 15 bucks. So if you don't need it right now, watch out for a sale and then check it out later. Back to what I actually did. So let's just check out the scene right now. Okay, so you see this clip right here. In this top left corner, there's no icon, and in this one that's color graded, there is an icon. So this is the icon for compound clip. So what I did for all of these clips, every single raw footage clip, I put that into a compound clip, and then I use the compound clip in the edit. And what that allows us to do is on here, you can make any color edits and make like a baseline image quality for the compound clip inside of it. And then when you use this in the edit, you can freely cut and place different pieces of that clip at different points in the timeline. Because how Final Cut works is if I split this right here, if I make changes to this half and I don't apply them to this half, then they're going to look like 2 different things. But if I use the compound clip, it's a referencing the full clip, and then I can cut that reference up. Hopefully that will make more sense later on as we get more into this, but just put your clips into a compound clip for color grading and making your image look good. And then for editing, use that compound clip later on. If that's confusing, just take the course, it'll make more sense. So for what do we do for these color grades? Here's the original image. So color board right here, lowering the shadows, raising the highlights. So you can see the luma values are pretty squashed. So if you turn on this color board, lower the shadows, raise the highlights, makes it a lot more contrasted. So we'll go to color curves 1, and we're gonna boost the highlights and lower the shadows just a little bit more. Boom. And for the exact values, I'm just showing these here so you can see the difference that it's making. But if you go into the course, it goes into the science of how much luma you want and all the different tricks and stuff for that. So if you want more details, I just watched the course. He can explain it a lot better than I can. So for this one, we're gonna raise all the saturation and also fix some of the white balance. And for the white balance in the overall picture, what you would do is you draw a mask in some spot that's gonna be white, and then you make sure that the vector scope right here doesn't show any signs of pointing in any one way or another. And then you fix that with temperature and tint. So the next one is hue and saturation, and that's focused on just the skin tones. And so you'll look at his like face right now, and I'll turn this on right there. See how he looks more pink and like a lot healthier? I'll turn it back off, and then he'll start to look sick. So that's off, and then on. So this one just fixes the skin tones. It's just a slight boost in this orange-red area. So that's a kind of basic overview of the color correction. I made one set of changes, and then I just copied and pasted that across the entire set of clips from this camera. And then for each clip, you have to make adjustments based on each one. If there's one clip that's got certain settings and you apply those same settings to another one, it might not translate perfectly, and so you have to go and make adjustments to each one, which is why it's very helpful to select which takes you're gonna have first, so you don't go through and color correct stuff that you're not gonna use in the final edit. So all this stuff was all shot with the same camera, all the narrative and all of Joao's guitar stuff. So Anthony, he shot in front of a green screen with a different camera in a different continent. And then Joel shot in front of a green screen in a whole other state with another different camera. And so because each camera has its own color science, you gotta figure out how to match them all into one cohesive picture, because you don't want it to be jarring for the viewer to watch one set of colors and then switch to another set of colors for a different person. You want it to look like one cohesive thing. And so having these notes on hand for when I'm doing all those color grading edits and then having comparison viewers and stuff within Final Cut really helps for me to do my best in matching the different cameras so that they all look like one video and not just a compilation of a bunch of different stuff. So the fight shot. This was a lot to tackle, but I think it came out pretty cool for me not having never done a lot of this stuff before. So let's open up the fight timeline itself. You remember when I was talking about compound clips, how you make color edits on a piece of footage, you put it into a compound clip and you edit the compound clip. Well, in that original footage, that little timeline, you can put a bunch of stuff in there. It doesn't have to be just color grading edits. You can stack other things, other elements onto it. And I'll show you for this one real quick. Like I got a couple of different things here, and that's all stacked into one compound clip that I use in one chunk on this timeline. And that has the changes for when he gets hit, the damage, the effects on his face and his whole body going on. That's just baked into this clip that I can use into this timeline, and then I can edit this chunk for timing within the narrative. So here's a look at the timeline for the fight shot. So all of these are different HUD overlays from Motion VFX, the M HUD Pack 3. So the different life bars. This is the Goblin life bar, so this right here. Here's all the different parameters for it. So I basically have a Goblin life bar, a limit bar, and a bar crawl. So I have one bar that's the blue bar, and then a bar below that that is the yellow bar that's glowing underneath. And they're both keyframed separately. So for example, when the mug hits, that first bar is going to instantaneously change to the health value that he's going to have. So he takes 7 damage, and then this goes down to 93%. And then after 1 second, this yellow bar will start to crawl down, and then it takes a second to go to that 93%. So it kind of gives an indication of how much damage was taken, and then the bar shrinks to indicate the lower health. And I do that for the employee and the goblin. So it's important to get the timing of this sequence down here right, so that way I can mark on these timelines when the hits actually happen, and then I can use that information to then go in and keyframe the health bars and get the timeline all consistent and looking responsive. Now, unfortunately, Final Cut has been updated, and there's been some broken links between this and one of the effects that I was using for smoke generator. So when this T pops up, I've looked into it briefly. I wasn't able to fix it. Just this, it is a smoke plume. Okay, so yeah, also when they take damage, there's a little special bar right here that fills up. So when he takes damage, boom, right there, you see the special bar fill up a little bit. I actually calculated, so for however much damage they take, we'll fill up a certain amount of the bar. And so they have 100 health, but I wanted to make sure that when they get down to 20% health is when their bar fills up. So you do the basic algebra of like figuring out, okay, 7 over 100 equals X over 80, and then solve for X. That's the amount of buildup for the special bar. Algebra is fun. Let's break down the mug shot real quick. So this is when the move kind of starts. I've got a bunch of markers on the timeline to give me indications of special events that I'm working on in that particular time. They all have different kind of meanings. What this shot is right here is a droplet effect. I keyframed it to expand out. It starts when he swings and ends right there. So trying to follow the trajectory of his hand. You see how the ring kind of follows his hand right there. And what I did was I put a shape mask on the ring so that you only see this right side of it. And then you feather out the shape mask so it looks like a wave that's moving forward instead of a shock wave that's moving out. And then that goes over the goblin and this goblin right here. So this goblin also has the same droplet effect on it. It gives that distorted look as it goes across the goblin. Might as well break down the damage flash right here. So what that is just I turned the whole screen red and then added a glitch transition that covers the entire screen. And what I'll do is I'll back that out, and that is a compound clip, and I mask it out. And so you'll see just the shape of the goblin. So that way it's only the goblin flashing, and then this compound clip really only just covering up that goblin. Then the 7 damage that pops up over the goblin's head. So let's back out of that, and that's all contained within this clip right here. And then in this clip, so I used the funhouse filter on this one, just keyframed it going across to show the goblin warping from that wave of the mug shot. And then this is also full screen, red, and then a glitch transition over the whole screen. You take that clip, mask it to just cover up the goblin. And I actually screwed up right here. There's supposed to be a damage indicator over the goblin that I forgot to turn back on. My bad. Let's turn it on for now. Fixing it post-edit. What happens next? So the goblin, he swings his bat, and then let's open this up and then we'll see. Okay, so there's this whole fight sequence right here. He swings a mug and then swings the bat, and then they transition, they move the they just hand him a new weapon. So I edited this whole sequence, but right now we're working in just this area right here because that's all that is selected for this chunk right here. So that's a good way to see, okay, I'm working in a compound clip. Let me open up that compound clip to see what it is I'm looking at. And then this shows just the start and end of the clip that you have on that outside timeline. So heavy puff, this is a smoke generator that is causing issues. Something got delinked, so I'm just gonna turn that off for now so we can see the rest of it. What I did was I took a screen grab of the bat right here, and then I put that into Affinity Photo and then rotated it and made a picture out of it that I could use as an element that flies towards the dude. And so for that bat, I got directional blur and a droplet effect to give it kind of a wave shape. Once it hits the guy, it becomes like a smoke plume and it fades away. And then Gaussian blur to give it bigger mass as it fades out. Let me turn all this off too, and then we'll be able to see it more clearly. Okay, so bat goes and swings and hits the dude. And then, yeah, the plume of smoke. Then I just copied and pasted that and then made sure to adjust the timing for when he swings the bat to when it hits the guy. I've got a bunch of markers for each one of those. And then also for each one of the hits, there's a little earthquake effect, kind of shakes the whole thing, so it makes it feel like there's more impact to those hits. So when he swings, you see how the whole screen kind of shakes a little bit. And then the damage indicators pop up and then him flashing as damage is dealt. So in the video, you'll see there's like a smoke plume that comes out. That's just an emitter. So yeah, the emitter I'm using for the smoke is made by Pixel Film Studios. Great option for budget VFX stuff if you don't mind dealing with budget quality assurance. So you'll see these damage indicators start ahead of time. When the video cuts to the scene, he's already been hit a couple times. I want those damage indicators already kind of be fading away. So he gets hit for the last time, and then he does his little upset face. And coming out of that, his major hit, and then you see his life bar come down. So the life bar is outside the compound clips, just overlaid on top of everything. And that was easier for me to keep track of where the damage was actually being taken and then keep it in one timeline instead of trying to break it up and match between a bunch of different shots inside of here. So all these include the fight and the effects, and then all the stuff out here include the information related to the fight. Although the damage indicators are within these compound clips. It was just the way that I was able to get it to work right. So hopefully that's making sense to you guys. For the weapon switch, you can see he holds his hand out behind him, and then the girl gives him a different kind of weapon and they swap it out, and then she's like fully in the frame and you don't want to see that. So I had to figure out a way to hide that. And so I transitioned from this shot, and then once it starts, I mask out that left side of the screen, get rid of the girl's hand, transition starts, you can kind of see her hand pop in a little bit, but then I did a transition to just move around the guy, and this mask is containing that that transition to just that area again. Same kind of concept as the damage flash. This is just a transition flash. Piece down here is just a screenshot of the room, so when the transition happens and I mask out that girl's hand, I'm masking out that whole chunk of the picture. And then behind that is actually just a picture of the office. A little bit of a different lighting, but I did my best to match the shape of it. And then I had it fade out so that way it kind of looks like it's kind of part of the transition. That was the workaround from the whole mess of handing off the weapons. And then up here, just some more HUD elements from Motion VFX. So this is a weapon background. So that's like the little gray box, and then the weapon select caption, that's this weapon select top thing up here. And then the pointer, that's this yellow arrows that slide from one weapon to the other. All the motion is manually keyframed. And then he goes and does his laptop thing. We'll go into this compound clip. So this was the earlier one. Now we're looking at just this piece of this timeline. There's a couple different elements of the lightning effects. So there's that swing, and this is just from a lighting effect video that I found on YouTube. It's got a whole bunch of different kind of stuff. I took a couple pieces from it, turned it into this. So compilation of different electrical shockwave torpedo something, and then a little burst when it hits him. And so you remember when the guy got hit with the bat, the whole screen shook a little bit. For this one, I wanted the whole screen to kind of glitch out. For when the electrical hits, it's causing some kind of electrical disturbance, and that's just another glitch transition. And then the goblin flashes red because he just took damage, and then the sparkler effects over that. Let's go back out, and then we'll zoom in on the close hit. So yeah, there's the transitions. I got the timing down, and then I came back and did the masking for the damage indicator. Remember, this is just a red screen that's got a transition onto it, and then I mask out that clip and then overlay that with more lighting effects. I also masked out the electrical effect because it was a full screen thing and I only wanted it over the goblin. So I did a very rough mask and just put the feather all the way up so that way it looks like it's kind of fading off of him, and then he flips you off. So he swings the bat. Smoke plumes, just kind of a similar copy paste of the first time he did it, except now the guy has taken enough damage to fill up his special meter, so now he's got a special. And then this flashes, I had to manually keyframe the glow, so every second it goes between no glow to full glow. You set the glow and then count 24 frames, and then set another keyframe, count 24 frames, set another keyframe. And then I tried to keep that consistent across the entire cut here, so I just went all the way through until he actually uses his special. And then so because he's got his now special meter charged, he has access to a new weapon that's got its own red glow to it, so that's the special weapon. I'm just making my own video game logic for this because that's fun. So this axe, that is also just, I found an axe online, put it through Affinity Photo, gave it a glow, and then use that as an image for inside of here. And then all these other ones, I think I just found this online. This is actually a cutout from the shot where they're getting coffee earlier in the video, and there's a close-up shot of the mug, and so I took that screenshot and cut out the mug. And then this is just another random screenshot online. So I put all these through Affinity Photo, cut out the backgrounds, and made them icons for the video. And then the axe charge up. So this one, this took me some time to figure out. So for this clip, I have this main timeline. So he's got his axe, and then he's gonna start charging it up, and then pay attention to this color graph over here. So as he charges it up, the whole picture gets a little bit more red and yellow. And then he swings it, and that's the whole footage that was captured. So this is coming from a fire emitter. I actually generated the fire for the axe in a separate, and then rendered that as its own footage, and then overlaid that on top of here. Having the emitter try to generate new fire every single time I wanted to play it was too much for the computer, and so I have it just on its own clip right here. But I didn't want a bunch of little like sparks. I wanted something to show that, hey, he's charging up the fire axe. So I found this overlay. It was a blue burst. I changed the color, made it red. The fire itself, it is a light source, and so it should be lighting up his face. And so a lot of these things I was just trial and error, like, okay, here's what I got. Does it look good? Something looks off. What is it? Okay, yeah, the fire should be a light source. If you're standing in front of a light source, you're going to be lit up. But a fire itself, it's a very particular light source, and what I did to simulate that was I just made a shape, just a white circle, and what I did was I applied an aged film because that has its own grain and scratches and brightness variance. So as a fire, it kind of flickers and pops and stuff, and so aged film gave that effect. And then I drew a mask to just cover his face and then follow his shape with it. And then he changed the blend mode to overlay, and that will allow that kind of flicker on his face for the fire. So you have a big shape, you mask it out, and then move that mask with the motion of the character, and then you apply those effects to it to give the flicker, and then overlay it on top. And so because his hands are in front, it separates the face and the legs. Treat those differently with different masks and different shapes. Once I had one down, it was intuitive to just do it again. So for this this Fire X smoke, I got a bunch of stuff going on here. Lots of blurs, motion blurs. So, okay, so if you look at this Fire X, so once it goes into motion, you see how the emitter, it doesn't have any inherent motion blur baked into it. So I had to simulate that through a whole bunch of different motion blurs that, yeah, all this stuff. So I'm using all these directional blurs, all these little chunks as he's swinging the axe and moving in different velocities. All of these separate masks have their own direction. So I went with directional blur because it can indicate a direction of motion. So as you're moving something in a particular direction, it will expand in that direction. But because he's moving in a radial pattern, there's no like radial direction to apply to this. And if you try to keyframe the direction of one of these blurs, it's going to affect the entire screen. So I had to figure out a way to isolate the directional blurs across the radius of his swing. Yeah, as you're going through all these masks, here's all the pieces of the masks. And so as he swings, and then also once he passes through a mask, the directional blur is at full strength, and then he passes through it, and then 1 second later, it will keyframe itself to no blur. So you'll see that blur right there when he swings the axe up, gives it that direction, and then another blur over here. And then as he swings across, you'll see all these other values. So pay attention to this amount as he swings his axe across. And so what that's simulating is that as he swings his axe through this particular area, the fire is going to be dragged out because of that intense motion. But in that particular spot, it's going to relax. And so you don't need that intense directional blur. So it fades out as he swings the axe. If you pay attention to, yeah, just this one location. So you see how intense the blur is, but as that trail dies out, it becomes less intense. And so I did that across the entire swing. But then also, I had to draw a mask to put the guy in front of the fire. He swings the axe behind him, and then all of a sudden there's the axe hilt that's in front of the fire, and then he himself gets in front of the fire. So I have to mask out the fire so that it stays behind him as he swings it forward. If I don't do that mask, then all of a sudden there's just fire that's just on top of everything. It doesn't give any sense of depth to the picture. Masking is a huge part of the VFX, as I've learned and just accepted. So that's this shot, and then the next shot, so this is a whole other generated fireball sequence, and I had to also do the directional blur thing for this one. So here's this, then the goblin, 999 damage. I've got the fire, so as he swings his axe, you'll see these directional blur keyframes on the side here moving around that correspond with the motion of his swing. And then yeah, the shape masks here. So this shape mask right here is for the floor, just to add some kind of flicker to the floor. You can't really see it though. But then this shape is just the flicker on him as he holds the axe, and then as the fire burns out, that color of the entire image comes back to normal and the flicker fades away from him as well. And then the goblin himself, he got that damage indicator that's this guy right there. So he turns red, but he's underneath the fire because I wanted him to just be completely enveloped. And what I did for this, so let me turn all this off, and you'll see him moving around. He's just trying to get into the different poses of the damage for the final fadeaway, flickering and doing its death animation. So he's going into the different poses. It cuts right here, but yeah, he just runs off screen. And so what I did was I had to mask out this whole half of the screen and then replace it with the image of when he's gone. So there's just a picture right here, and you can see the mask line holding this part of the image as a moving picture, while this part of the image is just a still image. So let me turn all this on, and what I ended up doing was retiming all this. So yeah, slow, just to hold the single frame of him in each different pose. It's just I slowed it down all the way. He kind of dances back and forth between the two different poses, and then he fades out. This is a Luma fade out. So it's like a smoother transition that doesn't affect the entire screen. It just focuses on just the goblin. So goblin fades out, and then he stands here for a little while as the goblin walks off. So I did a little fade transition to get him quicker into that little victory dance he does. And then he dances around for a little bit. That is the fight sequence. Yeah, all these elements are just all motion VFX HUD pack, and then Pixel Film Studios for the emitters. That took a lot of planning and trial and error and going back and forth with the band and getting their feedback. And then my roommate was also a big help, just giving me some feedback on what he thinks a video game scene should look like. So it was a little bit of a collaborative effort, but I think it came out pretty cool. Everyone seems to be happy with it. And then just more narrative. This is all easy stuff. So then the musicians now. So he was actually shot on location. He was there with the whole cast and crew because he's part of the narrative as well. Wasn't a whole lot to do here except just apply the color grades that I had applied across the board. So Anthony, he's the singer. He was shot at multiple different angles. So he's got a straight shot in front of a handheld camera. All right, so green screen. So let's go into this clip. Green screen. screen keyer. And this is all after same color corrections that also had to be adjusted for this camera setup. And then do a green screen keyer, get rid of the background. I did my best with getting his hair because he's throwing his hair everywhere and that is really difficult to key out properly. So these are the options I ended up going with. So I did the sample color, selected a little box of the green, and then set the strength to 0%. That gave better definition for the edges of the hair. Most of these decisions I made for all of this stuff, really just trying to get the hair looking right. And it still looks like he's got a bunch of mascara in his hair, but I didn't know how else to do it. What was difficult about his background is because they shot him at 3 different angles. So straight on, and then from the left, and then from the right. I couldn't find any stock photos of the same room shot at 3 different angles from the same spot. So I went to an office building and I took pictures. So I put my hand in front to get like a focus. I took a clear picture to get my hand out of the way, and then just compared those two and applied a Gaussian blur to simulate that same depth of field. And then I did my best to size him properly within the room, like his eye line's right above the cubicle, and then try to make that consistent across here and then here. Still looks a little wonky, but that seemed to sit all right, especially when you add the handheld filter and then it kind of moves the screen on its own, cuts out the edges as well. But that's for Anthony. Then Joel also shot in front of a green screen, and so look at this compound clip. So these are all compound clips. All of his shots were shot on a tripod. Then I just masked out the sides. So this is the footage for Joel. All of the shots for Joel were shot from this camera. All of the motion that I added in was either through the handheld filter or just like manually punching in. I'll show you a little bit more of that later. So I masked out the sides and then added a green screen keyer, and then he's just jamming in his penthouse office. I spent like 3 hours looking for a background for Joel. I didn't even know what I was looking for at first, like a high up office, low overlooking city or something. Ended up with this. I thought it looked pretty dope. Proper environment for a CEO. Here's actually a deleted scene. So here's the picture that I got, and then I took a grab of the floor and flipped it around and then warped it for the floor for this shot. Ended up not using the shot at all, but I got it set up right. Okay, so yeah, he's doing his solos, and then the solos are named off of which part of the solo he's doing. And then what's cool about Joel, the guitar solo happens during the fight sequence. He wanted to level up somehow, and so the check in the watch was going to be like he sees how much XP he gained, and so I had to come up with like a different solution. When he levels up, it is part of this compound clip that's just stacked with some stuff. The level up itself, it's just a basic title. I found a good video game looking font, and then just changed the opacity and position manually. Did a little like upwards crawl. So when he levels up, he starts getting a rainbow thing around him, and what that is it's a prism blur which separates the color values. And then I also changed the blend mode to linear dodge, so that way you can see the background behind it, because if it's a normal blur, then that's gonna be too invasive. And so I just overlaid that same clip on top of itself without any of the prism effect. And so as he levels up, this prism blur, you'll see, so I'll hit play, and then you see it keyframes upwards. For the hue change for him, this hue saturation curve, so you do a color selection, you pick the color of the suit, and then I actually manually calculated all these keyframes. So it's 1, 2, 3. It just circles back up and forth. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 1, 2, 3, and then did that a couple times until I settled on the green, and now he's got a green suit. Once he has a green suit, then you just copy this hue curve onto the other solos that come after it, and then he's playing a green guitar and a green suit. Another thing though to note about the prism is you see how it's rotating around? I had to do that manually as well. So every frame it rotates 20 degrees. And that's just kind of where I ended up with. And so this value actually doesn't go over 360. It'll only go from 0 to 360. So if you want to keep it rotating, you have to set a keyframe at 360, and then it's 20 degrees. So the circle's really like it's going around and then snapping back, and then going around, snapping back real quick, snapping back. That happens in one frame, and the motion is consistent, 20 degrees per frame. It's a simple calculation. By this point, I knew he was done, so I stopped keyframing it. And then for the solo 5-1, same kind of deal where he levels up, did another hue saturation change, going from green, levels up into pink. And then the prism, if you notice, that actually expands, so it continues spinning, and then the amount gets higher as he levels up more, all the way to 100. That's the end of the solo. And then Ben, so he actually filmed himself playing along to the song. So he sent me his screen recordings, and I just played those back on a laptop, opened it up, did a fake Zoom thing, and then just opened this up in Windows Media Player to make it look like he's joining in on a Zoom call for his drum parts. He did 4 takes, and I kind of cut between them because each one of these he did something that I thought was funny. I think that's a real phone call that he answers. He's He was in the middle of filming. Somebody actually called him up and he's like talking on the phone. I used that in the video because it was hilarious. And then he drinks his little martini glass. That's pretty much all the stuff for the individual groupings of shots. These are all effects that I was playing around with. Okay, let's go into the main timeline. So here's the main timeline. So what I did was once I had all of the musicians' footage, I could go into here and make a multicam clip. They were all recording audio in their room where they were filming. Final Cut, I did a multicam clip, sync through audio, and then lined all of them up. So here's all of the musicians, everything that's playing along to the song that needs to be lip synced or like instrument synced. So here's all the clips, arranged it like vocals, guitars, drums, and then all the guitar solos, close-up shots, chorus. And then notice that each one of these is a compound clip. If I want to change something about this solo 2-3, I can go into here, then it takes me to that compound clip, and then I can go into there and then change something about like the color balance or the movement or something, and then I'll back out layers to get back to the multicam edit. And then here's the song itself that everything is synced up to. This is the whole multicam edit. Once I get that in here, then I can go to view, show angles. As the song is playing along, as I'm watching the video, I can pick and choose which angles I want to show at whatever particular time. So this is the first mix I got, and then Joel sent me another mix with a longer tail. So I just matched those up. But I have this audio outside of the timeline in case somebody lip synced and they were late on a part or something, or something happened to where I need to move that clip around. It's not tied to the audio and I can freely move these clips. So I can move this to this position. Like if you came in late on a strum and I need to move the video, it's not tied to the audio. The video starts with the narrative. I'll have this here and then I'll have the browser up as well. Kind of basic sequence is that the boss shows up at the office first and then he starts jamming out. Drummer calls in, and then now the singer, he starts coming in when he starts singing. Guitar player, he gets all pumped up for his introduction solo, and then kind of cutting between all these new characters that we've introduced now. And then the drum fill, the first drum feature, he glitches out because he actually forgot his fill. He didn't play it right, or he did something, he screwed it up. So I'm like, I need to hide that somehow. So this is in a compound clip. I did a couple glitch transitions, but you see how it covers the full screen. And then this is just another retime, just slowed it down to 1% so that it's just one frame, cut to another frame, another glitch transition that covers the whole screen. If you go back out here, I have this little window masked out so that the pixelation doesn't affect the rest of the computer screen. And then we start telling the story, the narrative. So going through the order of events in the sidebar here will give me a direction on how to organize the narrative. Also balancing in the musicians, and if there's like a special guitar fill or feature, or like somebody makes a good face, they're into it, I want to make sure that I can feature that while also telling the story. So the goblin's meeting everybody, everyone's still jamming, rocking out, and then dude meets the goblin, goblin starts messing around with him. So as you can see, like the timeline down here, musicians are always playing. I want to make sure I can see all the different angles that I have available to me, and I got to go through and also check the other pages of angles as I'm playing around. So I'll do a pass where I'll just look at one page, and I'll do another pass where I'll look at another page, and then compare these to the shots that I have in the timeline, and then just kind of cut back and forth. I mean, cutting to another scene is pretty straightforward. You just click on it, and then it just makes a cut and changes to that angle. I think there's a couple times where the singer forgot a word or didn't say the right word, so that might have dictated if a person lip syncing screws up. Take all that into account too. So crafting the narrative along with the musician playthrough. So making sure you can feature the narrative in a sequence that the viewer can follow while also showing off all the musicians and keeping everything kind of in the same world. And then, okay, so this right here, this is when the employee guy, he's doing his little montage of all of the times where he's getting messed with. The goblin's flirting with all the girls that the guy likes. This is when the fight sequence starts, guitar solo and the fight. So right here, there's a transition, little versus screen. The guy and the goblin, both just still images that are moving slightly apart. And then a lightning bolt that I just found online somewhere. And then the little versus indicator from that Motion VFX HUD pack. This lightning bolt is cutting across, and so I'm just masking out the goblin's frame that goes along the lightning bolt. And so transition his movement into that sequence right there. Bring that out. That is a compound clip within compound clip. There's lots of layers to these compound clips. And so once you get that put into the timeline, then transition that into the fight shot. Then I got a bunch of markers here for when things happen. And then right here, when he does the mug slap, it does a transition that kind of mimics that screen effect. That transition transitions into more guitar solo, and then transitions back into that mug thing. So I'm also trying to like balance the transitions from the fight to the guitar solo to keep everything kind of glued together. So there's two layers because I had this sequence right here that didn't have all the elements that we wanted, and I already edited the sequence, and so I re-rendered that fight shot. So that fight shot I actually rendered as its own video, and so I put that rendered file, the version 2, over this that included more elements that we wanted to throw in there, and then just use this for reference, kept it on top of there. So he gets hit, transition back and forth into the guitar, another transition here that moves the whole scene with the baseball bat, so it kind of gives more kinetic energy to that motion. He levels up, so this is still matched along with the song. More of the fight sequence on top of that. Weapon select, the laptop electric slap, and then I also even added a glitch effect on top of this, so a little overlay to give even more electrical disturbance. Gets hit by the goblin, guitar solo, then this is when he selects the axe, and then this is also when Joel does his last level up. So when the last chorus hits, that's when you see the guy charging up his special move, and then going back to Anthony on his vocal feature, and then when the band kicks in, that's when axe explodes and turns into fire. And I got the timing of this just right because I sped it up, and we'll go back through this because I sped up most of these clips and retimed things to make sure that they would fit within the timing of the song. So then more musicians building up suspense of like, hey, there's this whole like crazy fire swing, what the hell is going on there? But then also to line up when the troll gets hit with that critical hit, to line up this hit with the start of the next chorus. And then he dies, life bar goes down, goblin disappears, more music, the victory, and then a light transition that goes into the office from like the night shot of the fight. It's like the lights come back on and now all of a sudden it's daytime outside. Celebration, throwing papers, man finally gets the girl, and then the drummer leaves, and then the boss leaves the office, and then that's the end. And then the end screen, this is just some of the B-roll. I wanted to put the last 20 seconds just as something fun, because in YouTube, the last 20 seconds you can allocate for an end screen where you have like suggested videos and like a subscribe button. So let's go back to the beginning. So what I did was a lot of these shots, I added my own motion. So there's a handheld filter that will add like it's a baked in shake. So there's a lot of shots. I went through the entire thing, combed through each little clip, reviewed the motion and where the crop was. And so I did a lot of keyframing for manually cropping things and moving things out and panning things around within the shot. Here's a good one. So when Joel is signing his contract, pay attention to the position and the scale as I scrub through. So I zoom into Joel manually and then move the camera focus over to him to center him back on screen. So that combined with the handheld shake filter keeps the viewer looking at just the thing that they want to be looking at while also keeping excitement in the motion of the scene. Like for this one, I'm zooming in a little bit on him as he's hitting his high note. And then for like this scene when the goblin slaps the coffee mug, I even added an earthquake effect to shake the whole screen because it's disorienting when someone smacks a cup out of your hand. And then it cuts and then zooms in on them. The employee gets the coffee smacked out of his hand, and then the drummer gets his own coffee. Like for this scene, it's focused on the guy and the girl, and so I cropped it into them. And then when the goblin starts walking in, I zoom out and then pan over, and then he starts asking the girl to come over, and then it zooms in slightly as she walks over. And so yeah, I went through the whole video, adding in motion, adding in crops. So yeah, like this is a good one. He's reaching towards the camera. As the camera's moving closer to him, you see the scale changing. You just go through making sure that each scene contains only the visual elements that you want the viewer to be focused on. Because if there's too much going on, they're not going to know what to look at. They're going to miss the actual point of the scene, and there's going to be too much information, especially in something that's moving as fast as this is, because a lot of these scenes are retimed. So this is fast motion, fast motion. This is another like 130%, 122%. So a lot of these scenes are sped up. Some of them are normal, but a lot of these are sped up to like 120%, somewhere around there. And it's important to watch it back to make sure that it still looks kind of natural. Without screen recording and with everything rendered, it plays back a lot smoother than it is right now. Like this chair pull follows the guy, so the scale is changing, position's changing, so I'm manually moving the crop within the frame. This is what it looks like for that whole sequence without punching in and out and cropping it. So The Office was a big influence on the look for this video. Watching little clips of The Office and then realizing how much activity that the cameraman is actually putting into the scene, because they're zooming in and out, they're moving all around, they're doing all kinds of stuff. I wanted to make sure to simulate that within this video to add more excitement because it's an exciting song. So that's the main timeline. And then even outside of this, I went and did a couple of extra color grades. So hue, saturation, I got rid rid of any saturation in the very darkest shadows, color curves, just a slight bit more contrast. So this last one adds a little bit more of a blue sheen, bumps up the skin tones, pop out a little bit more, gets rid of some of the dull green. Yeah, and then that's the whole thing. I don't know if I've forgotten anything. It's been a couple months since I worked on this. Hopefully that is a good insight. So yeah, that's an overview of the Kill Troll with Axe video. If you got any questions or comments, leave them down below. Feel free to tell me about everything I did wrong. Hopefully that was insightful to anyone. If you're an aspiring video editor, if you wanted an inside look at how this was made, or if you just like looking at behind the scenes. Hopefully you got something out of this. Shout out to Corridor Crew and their VFX Breakdown videos to really show like how much detail some of the professionals get into, because they get into the nittiest of gritties for their VFX shots on like the big Hollywood movies. So that was some inspiration to not hold back on how far I want to go with some of the shots. Especially for the fight scene, there's lots of little tiny detail things that seem to make a good difference when they all kind of accumulate and stack up into the final image. Once you add them all up, it helps blend the whole image together to make it more immersive. But I think this video has droned on long enough, so if you stuck around this long, thank you very much. Have a good day.